part 2 of my code Platoon application. So a time I learned something new, when I picked up the guitar, I got it for my birthday, and I had always wanted to play. I started by doing like a hands-on kind of a familiarization approach where I was just like trying to figure it out. So I'd go string by string, and I just go down the frets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, just trying to figure it out. So that kind of worked, and I found that I had a musical ear, so it was easy for me to find the notes I wanted, but one string just isn't music. My friends playing at high school during lunch, they used to jam, and I always wanted to jam with them. So I went to one of them. I was like, "Hey, can you teach me some tips? Because I feel like I'm really not getting to where I want to be. I can't express myself musically the way I have music in my head." So he taught me power chords. He was like, "Dude, what are you doing with this one string thing?" He taught me the power chords, and that just absolutely revolutionized everything I was doing. From that point, basically 2 days later, I was playing like Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit. I could play a little Metallica and stuff, just because knowing that shape that I could use anywhere on the guitar really just opened up options for me. So I wanted to really express myself more through music, and what I learned was through doing some research on the internet that there is guitar tablature. And if you can't read music, which I could read piano music, but I didn't know how to read on the guitar, it's basically like another language for learning the guitar. And it teaches you through frets and strings. So I took that on, and I started basically like, the intro song that I played is actually the first song that I learned on, and it was through guitar tablature. And people were pretty impressed because it's pretty complex. So through the guitar tablature, I was finally able to play at the level I wanted. It taught me other different guitar chords and things like that, and I was finally able to like express myself musically. When I heard something or I felt something, I could play it. What would I do different? Let's see. Differently, I would definitely ask for help up front. The jam sessions, they helped a ton. Having that third person perspective where he was like, "Oh man, you're missing this key," and then that key just further accelerated my learning. Also, being more specific. Like when I thought of songs in my head, there were techniques that like the music played, but I didn't know how to express that. So if I had been able to say, "Hey, I want this sound that does this," oh, okay, well, you need to learn these techniques. I could just go down the list and learn it all. Let's see. So for the third question, why programming? Okay, so this one's interesting. Surprisingly, I took a Microsoft Office class when I was in college. And the first thing I took was Microsoft Access. And that program was basically like a database, and you could organize data and make connections from Office to Word, and like basically query the system. You could ask it questions, you could program it to do the things you wanted to do, and I loved that. I loved learning it, and I was like, man, I wish I could do this for a living. So what I did was, like, later I found out that is kind of what programming is, being able to make those connections and learning tools and being able to create other variables and stuff like that. I love learning, and coding really scratches a creative itch for me. So thank you for your time, and I really hope that you'll choose me for a seat. Thank you. Bye.
Hey, this is Christopher Wade, and this is part 2 of my Code Platoon application. For today's challenge, I will be writing a function that takes in a data set or a string, and it will evaluate the number of X's and O's, and if they're true, it'll return true, and if they're false, it'll return false. Alright, I'll start by going ahead and establishing the variable for the information that I'm going to pass that data set. So this is going to be my string here, XOXXO. The way we write a variable is we start by saying var or let or const. Var is short for variable. The string is what I've named the string, and equals, obviously, this data set. Yeah. You'll notice there's quotation marks. You can use single or double. That indicates a string. And the semicolon is syntax, which is basically computer grammar for whatever coding language you're using. So for this challenge, we want to count both the numbers of x's and o's. So I'm going to go ahead and establish a container for each of those. So I'll go ahead and put let x equal 0. Alright, and that's another variable. I've used let because let indicates that this variable is going to change. On the other side, we could put const, which is short for constant, which means that the variable should not change. Alright, my other variable is going to be o, and it will also be equal to 0 because we're going to count. Alright, and I've put that outside of the function just so whenever I call it inside or outside, it knows what I'm talking about. It's globally known versus being locally known. So within the function, it's only going to be able to be used within the function. If I put it outside, then it can call it from anywhere. Alright, I'll go ahead and establish the function. So I do that by writing the word function, naming it string challenge here, and then I've told it the parameter or argument is going to be string. So this var string is going to translate to the argument being passed. Alright, I'll open my bracket. Functions are basically like buttons. So what do I want it to do? If every time I press this button, I want it to do this function. Kind of self-explanatory. So I want it to take in this string, and what I want it to do is I want it to evaluate how many x's and o's are inside of it. Then after I'm done with my function, I want to compare the two and decide whether they're both equal or not. So my next step will be a for loop. Alright, so I'll go ahead and write that out. For I equals 0, semicolon, while I is less than string dot length I plus plus, increment I. Alright, and then open brackets for my function. Alright, so what I'm going to explain here is the for loop. So a for loop, basically, a loop is just telling the computer to read from left to right, if that's the way that you write it. This is the way we'd write that out. So for parentheses, I equals 0. So I is going to be my index number. So I equals 0. Computers use zero-based indexing, which means when it's reading this string here, it's not going to start at 1, it's going to start at 0. So my whole entire string length would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And my first index of that string would be 0, which is this x here. So I want you to start at 0 while I is less than the whole length of this string, so all the way to the end. I would like you to increment the index, so move one position. So we'll move left to right one position. We haven't told it what to do, we just told it that's what we want it to do. Now you can change this up. I could equal 1, so I could start somewhere else. Also, I could say I plus plus is the same as saying I equals I plus 1. But I could say I equals I plus 2, and now it wouldn't just be moving one position over, it'd be moving 2, so it'd be skipping one. So what do I want it to do while it's reading through? Well, I want it to count and add it to my variable. So while you're reading through here, if, an if statement, if string, if the string index equals x, because it's a letter, I want to make sure I use the parentheses here. So if the current index equals the letter x, I close my parentheses, and then just like the other functional brackets, I want to tell it what I want it to do. X plus equals 1, and then semicolon, because that's the grammar involved. So now, every time it goes through left to right and it sees the letter X, I want it to add 1 to this variable X that I've established. Alright, I close the bracket. Now, what else do I want it to do? I also want it to evaluate the O's as well. So, if string index equals the letter O, open my brackets, what do I want it to do? O plus equals 1. I want you to add 1 to the variable O. Alright, now that I'm done with that, I know what I want it to do with the loop. I go ahead and close off my if statement. I close off my for loop, and then I'm going to give it a boolean, a conditional statement, and a boolean, because we've counted up the numbers of x's and o's, and now we want it to evaluate whether they're equal or not. So another if statement, if parentheses x equals as x is equal to the value of O, return true. Just another if statement. Else, open my brackets, return false. I close the bracket, and then I close the entire function. Alright, so if x equals O, I've told it that I want it to return true. Otherwise, because it can only be true or not true, it's a boolean, true or false, it will return false. And then we close the function, because every time this function gets called, this is what we want it to evaluate. So we could use this on any data set. Alright, then we're going to console.log, which means I want it to, basically I'm calling my function within console log, so I want it to give me the answer here in the console. And I'll go ahead and run it. And there we go. False. So it's counted up the number of x's and o's, and that's true because we have 1, 2, 3 x's and 1, 2 o's. So we're done. Thank you for considering me in Code Platoon. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and I really hope you pick me. Thanks. Bye.